Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration. We in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history.
The Secretary of State in Munich, and this was not a regular diplomatic speech. This was a warning to our European allies. We are together, but the Old West is over. The question is, did they get the message? Welcome to the Big Money Show, everyone. I'm Jackie DeAngelis, along with my co-hosts Taylor Riggs, Dagan McDowell, Kevin O'Leary, and here for the hour, Bahnsen Group founder and managing partner David Bahnsen. Great to see you. Secretary Rubio making it quite clear under President Trump, the U.S. wants partnership, but it won't be business as usual. He took aim at the post-Cold War fantasy that globalism would somehow replace nationalism, that trade alone would guarantee peace, that if we just lowered tariffs and opened markets, then everyone would play fair. Well, they didn't, and now it's time to adjust.
We do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it.
The West hollowed out its own factories, expanded its welfare states, and outsourced critical supply chains. So it's time to reset the terms. America's not alone here, but it's also not on autopilot either. Europe will need to decide for itself because Washington clearly has. Kevin, I want to come to you first on this. And what struck me in what Marco Rubio was saying, the particular line that I loved, was we don't want our allies to be weak because that makes us weaker. He's talking about strengthening collectively, but things need to be different than they have been.
This all started a few weeks ago at Davos on the famous speech Carney gave, the Prime Minister of Canada, with the words, "New World Order." That did not go well with the Trump administration, as you remember. Actually, it hurt relations with Canada at this point, which hasn't really restarted on the tariff front. The point is, though, we're getting to a place now where there's only one adversary, and I think it's time to just call it out: China. That's it. And so you either are with us, so to speak, against China, or you're not, because China is getting ready for world dominance. And I call it what it is: economically, militarily, AI, power, you name it. Those guys are not fooling around, and if we don't wake up and get together on this, they will be the superpower. Now, if you're okay with that, and you want to live in that kind of a world, well, I don't. So I'd like to see this thing worked out pretty damn fast, because Europe has to get on board, Canada has to get on board, everybody that believes in democracy, freedom, and capitalism has to get on board, or you will see those guys walk into your country one day.
Wow. And a lot of people are worried about that, looking at Europe and the strength between us and our allies, that sometimes wavers, maybe goes back and forth just a little bit. President Trump has really tried, David, I think, to strengthen NATO, to make countries pay their fair share, but to support us more in that way. How do you think his efforts have been received?
Well, I think that parts of his efforts have not been received well, but I think the parts that matter, what Secretary Rubio was speaking to, there isn't any choice about this. The NATO countries have to be better parts of NATO if this thing is going to last. I thought his speech had moral clarity. I thought it spoke to the undergirdings of Western civ in the right way. He had the right tone and tenor, in my opinion, but also there was strong clarity behind the message. And I think what Kevin said is important. The issue with China is not geographical or ethnic. It is purely about values. We believe in freedom. They are a communist country. That's the moral clarity. I think that we have to, though, be very careful that if we're opposed to them being anti-market, we need to maintain our pro-market stance. We cannot become anti-market in defense of some fighting an adversary that we don't think is adequately for markets. That's the issue to me. We need to hold fast to what we believe in America.
We could talk about China for the whole entire hour, but there were other things that happened in Munich as well. Hillary Clinton made some comments about migration that I think are really important, Dagan, because part of strengthening the United States has been closing off the borders. And I was particularly shocked at what she said. So let's just take a listen.
There is a legitimate reason to have a debate about things like migration. It went too far. It's been disruptive and destabilizing, and it needs to be fixed in a humane way with secure borders that don't torture and kill people, and how we're going to have a strong family structure, because it is at the base of civilization.
It went too far, she acknowledged, and that it was destabilizing.
Always leave it to Hillary Clinton to gasp for relevancy on the world stage. Where was she when we had no border? Because Joe Biden and her ilk, the Democrats, were in charge. They did not enforce what is our natural land border. No, it was wide open, and millions of illegal aliens and criminals poured into this country. And the Democrats laid the foundation for cartels, human traffickers and drug traffickers to profit from human misery. And it also imposed a vast economic and financial and even like moral burden on the rightful residents of this country, but she said nothing. She's saying this now because this is a loser for the Democrats and the liberals, what they have done to this nation. And the president and his administration are trying to right this multi-year wrong, and she knows it. Can we get to AOC? Because she was also on the world stage. I heard someone earlier on the news channel make the comment that, oh, well, you can't really pay too much attention to what she says. She's just a member of Congress. Well, why did she go overseas then and say this?
In a so-called rules-based order, the rules for whom? Because for all too long, the rules only applied to the United States, Europe, its allies, and we would carve out exceptions for the global south. Over the last 5 years, we've seen such a breaking and such a fraying of these alleged Western values that people wonder if it ever existed in the first place.
Matt Whitaker is sitting there looking at her going, I don't even know how to interpret what she's saying. My favorite was, though, when AOC was simply asked, should the U.S. commit troops to defend Taiwan if China invaded? And her answer was literally, there's a long history there. We have a long-standing policy. That is literally what she said. She's an embarrassment, but she's clearly gotten ahead of herself in terms of her ambition. So I hope her own party kind of tucks her away somewhere in the back of the underwear drawer.
And when you bring up the Taiwan issue, I think what the president is trying to do by unifying in this way, by strengthening America, worrying about the allies, is a strategy of deterrence, something that we didn't see in the Biden administration. Deterrence was not a strategy they used when Vladimir Putin was moving troops on the border of Ukraine, for example. And then, of course, he invaded, and we all know how that has not ended years later now. So, Taylor, I'm wondering what you think about what the president is doing here. He's got so much on his plate, whether he's dealing with the economics of the United States, or he's dealing with wars that are ongoing, or he's dealing with bigger foreign policy issues in the Middle East. He also is kind of thinking about the big picture long term in this, and his cabinet obviously echoing his sentiment.
And I think it's Marco Rubio who is spot on, who's talking about how we need to be thinking about America first. Doesn't always need to be America alone, but we have to get our allies together, focused on our goals. And we've talked about pulling Europe closer We just came off of Davos, like you mentioned, Kevin, where there's been a big focus on why Europe isn't innovating. How do we get them to innovate? How do they want to get ahead of AI? Because they finally realized that this big, remember when Germany used to be this big industrial complex and they can't innovate, they can't produce anymore? And so I do like the fact that we're thinking about how America can continue to innovate and lead, but Europe needs to get their act together. And my worry is I just don't think they get it still. I mean, Davos 2025, ahead of Meta, portion made waves when she said, you know, Europe hasn't created a $100 billion business. In that time, the U.S. has created $6 trillion businesses. And then this time around, there's a draft circling about their Made in Europe Act, their Industrial Accelerated Act, which is pushing Europe to try to ensure that manufacturing accounts for 20% of Europe's economic growth by 2035. But in that, they're still talking about green energy, and they're trying to get steel that counts as green because they don't want to think about carbon emissions. And so, Jackie, I look at that and I think, sounds great if you want to look at manufacturing to be part of your economy, but if you're still looking at all your green energy and putting that into proposals, it just shows me you still don't get it.
Right, and there are big ideological differences that are keeping them from innovating the way you're saying they certainly would be able to, but Kevin, it does feel like they don't want to because of those ideological differences. And so I wonder, even with a president like President Trump, when the thinking is so different, how do you bridge that gap?
You're either with us or against us. That's the message, and that's coming loud and clear from the White House, obviously, and that's got to be reconciled somehow. Regarding technology, it's rather interesting because some of the most advanced innovations in AI came from Germany and France, and yet they're not commercialized. They get commercialized in the United States. So you get these amazing geniuses. Once you identify them, we scoop them up, pay them $100 million. One of them went to Meta, and another is going somewhere else, and Elon Musk hires them. They don't get it when it comes to innovation because there's too much belief that you want regulation, not innovation, to govern your economy. And that hasn't worked for them for the last 60 years, ever since the end of the Second World War. You would think the new leadership, the younger leadership in Italy and Germany and France and Switzerland would say, this isn't working, we got to fix it. Because it's not like they don't have the talent. I hire their talent. I steal their talent. All I have to say to them is, you want to stay home in your European country, or you want to make a ton of dough? Yeah. Come over to the United States. That's what happens.
They don't have capital markets. They don't believe in innovating in capital markets. People can sit here and bemoan Wall Street all they want. They have talent. They have technology. They can't monetize it, commercialize it, because they have had no ability to put it out into financial situations for decades. That's the issue why they have no mega cap companies that are successful. It is literally that they hate this idea of finance leading to profits, leading to growth, and so they use regulation as a tool to control their economy. Also
litigation, because they take every large company and sue them for billions, because they don't have any tax revenue from Meta and they don't have it from Google, and they just keep suing them. Oh, yeah. That's a model that's not going to work forever, and I think at this point with AI emerging, they're trying to build a data center outside of Paris right now off nuclear power. And we are, in the Western society, we're so far behind China on power. And yet, if you look, none of us, not a single country, including the U.S., has advanced electrical power in the last 20 years. We have none. And the Chinese did 511 gigawatts. I keep harping on China because I'm watching them kick our heinies. We got to get focused, including Europe, and say, by the way, invasion on Taiwan will not be with boots on the ground. They will use technology to shut that place down and use drones. And unless we have better AI, they'll win.
They're not necessarily better. They want you to think that they're better than we are in terms of their
AI. More power.
They might have power, and we have people in the White House who are fully aware, coming out of the private sector, Chris Wright in particular, who has a background not only in natural gas, hydraulic fracturing mapping, but also nuclear. He is fully aware of what the multi-trillion dollar, what the $10 trillion investment that was essentially set fire, if you can call it an investment, into climate and green energy technologies. He's fully aware of what has to be done, and the clock's going to run out on him but the idea is to put in place developments. And I think that tech will innovate on AI and simultaneously innovate on energy, and that they will quickly solve our problem. But I mean, it's always good to feel like you're the underdog and know and kind of strive to crush China in every way. But in terms of the administration, I want them to treat China like an adversary, which they are.
They are.
But we don't treat them that way.
But
Not out of the White House, we don't.
Here is what I'm worried about. You're fighting the allies who have these ideological differences. They have a completely different business model than we do. You're fighting people like Hillary Clinton and AOC here at home, you know, the progressives in the Democrat Party. And then even within the GOP, sometimes the party can be fractured and not always on the same page. And so I just wonder, and real quick, if you just want to put a button on it, I just wonder how we can move forward and really take China on seriously when there is so much fighting going on.
Well, from my vantage point, the easiest way to have unity is to stand behind the principles you believe in. So I'm a Reaganite through and through. I stand against communism. I stand for markets. There's plenty in the right that still stand for those things, and we can do this together. And Kevin's right. The enemy with China is who we should be focused on. And I think that Europe needs to get in line. And by the way, Europe doesn't need to do it to make us feel better. Europe needs to do it for their own self-preservation.
Exactly. All right.